The French author Émile Zola once said, "The artist is nothing without the gift, but the gift is nothing without work." Our guest today knows no boundaries when it comes to the creation of his work. Never formally educated in the arts, Joe Gadreau is a published author and award-winning artist, proving all it takes to share your gifts is imagination and, of course, work. Joe, thank you for joining us today.
Thank you, Kelsie.
You are definitely a homegrown artist. Talk about where you're from, your upbringing, and how that helped influence who you are as an artist.
I grew up in Baltimore City, basically southwest Baltimore, affectionately known as Pigtown.
Why is it known as Pigtown?
Well, they said that years and years ago they used to drive the pigs through the streets to the market, so it was like a market there. So that's why it got to be known as Pigtown.
Okay. I'd always wondered that. So
yeah, I know a lot of people do. You know, they're like, this is a strange name. Why is it called that? You know?
Right.
I guess yeah, and I grew up. I grew up at a time when TV was young. You know, so there wasn't as much TV shows like that and stuff. You know, so we did a lot more as far as like using our imaginations and stuff like that. You know, we did have a lot of like cowboys and Indians type figures and stuff like that. I was more into like the knights and the castles and things like that. You know, more fantasy things. So I think you know, nowadays there's so much like with video games, there's so much movies and all. You know, and I don't think
they take the place of your imagination.
Yeah, it sure does. You know, people don't develop their imagination as much. You know, because it's already done for you. You know, and so I think that was one of the things. You know, I was also very active in sports when I was growing up. You know, the painting, like drawing, I could always draw. You know, and I always loved art. I was always big into the comics and things like that. So, and also I was in. A little later, I got more into movies, so I loved the movies. You know, I always wanted to do something with movies too. You know, but also I could play the guitar, and I loved music. You know, music was always a big thing into my life. You know, I think it was a big inspiration. You know, so I was doing that too. So I took art more as like more as just like a hobby. You know, more so than something really to pursue. It wasn't until really later on that I really started getting more into the art.
Well, you're definitely an all-around artist. You just touched on the fact that you paint, you draw, and you also write books, which we'll get into more in depth later. But how did you find out you had a talent for all of those things, and how did you develop those skills?
I think, well, like I said, I could always draw. My mom's brother, my uncle, he was really good with drawing and all too. So he was part of an inspiration. You know, when I was younger, he would draw some pictures for me, and then I started, you know, drawing. And same thing, I would like, sometimes if I seen a movie I really liked, then I would start trying to draw some of the characters. And it's just something that I did have, and then with being so influenced by the comics and all, because the comics were big back then. You know, this was
what was your favorite comic?
Probably Spider-Man was a big one, of course, you know, because I'm into the spiders and things like that.
I was just noticing the Spider-Man on your shirt.
Yeah, so Spider-Man there, you know, so that he was one of my favorites. Thor was one of my favorites too, because I've always been into like the mythology more, like the Greek, but I liked more the Norse mythology, which was with the Vikings and things like that. So he was one of my favorites.
Jack Kirby is an important name for you to know, because Jack Kirby's career spans the entire history of comic books. In the 60s, he went to work for Marvel Comics, where he created the Fantastic Four, the Hulk, the Silver Surfer, and a host of other characters that you all know, in collaboration with a man named Stan Lee. He created a whole new universe of characters with a lifestyle and with a philosophy that was his alone.
I see that story first. I feel that story first. I know those people first. When I put them down, they've already lived. My stories are very sincere. My stories are people's stories. And there's elements in my stories that are very, very real.
Were there any artists in particular that influenced you or intrigued you?
Yeah, as far as the comics was concerned, it was Jack Kirby. He was a big influence. He was like, when I was first getting into the comics, you figure I was like around 8, 9, so like that. And the Marvel comics were new on the scene. And DC Comics, which was Superman and Batman, they were like, you know, they were the predominant comic at that time. And then Marvel started coming along. Marvel introduced Spider-Man and Fantastic Four and Incredible Hulk and Iron Man and all them things, you know. So, and they took more of a realistic like approach to it. They set things more into like everyday life instead of like creating like with Superman it was Metropolis, and then Batman it was Gotham City, so these was like fictional places, whereas they were setting things in like New York City and doing, you know, and trying to do, make it more realistic, make it that their superheroes had, you know, everyday problems like other people,
right.
you know. As far as painting, I really got into Frank Frazetta, and I think Frank Frazetta has been around for a long, long, long time. He did things back in the 30s and 40s. I mean, he was doing comics and stuff like that. And then he started to get into painting. One of the things that he did that really like put him on the map, you know, make people really take notice, was he did a series of Conan covers back in the 60s for the paperbacks. And so he was a big influence.
And what type of painter was he? What kind of art?
He basically could do pretty much anything. You know, he could do incredible pencil drawings and pen and inks. You know, he's really started to become known for his oil paintings, is what he became known for. But he also was great with watercolors too. You know, he was just an all-around artist. I mean, he was truly gifted. There's probably not any artist that's into any of the fantasy art type things today that was not influenced by Frank Frazetta.
So that was his genre, it's called fantasy?
Yeah, he pretty much created the fantasy art, more or less. I mean, before that, it was really different. You know, everything before that, if they were doing something that was in the fantasy genre, they would depict them more like maybe Roman, you know, warriors and things like that. You know, their armor was more like based on historical things, whereas Frazetta started coming up with his own worlds, his own, you know, his own characters. He came up with, you know, he pretty much, like I said, he almost created the fantasy genre.
What was that painter's name with the big afro? I think his name was Bob Ross.
Oh yeah, Bob Ross. Yeah, he was a big influence to me too. Yeah, because like when I first started trying to paint, you know, that was one of the things. You know, I was frustrated at first when I started to paint because I could draw something, you know, and make it look exactly what I wanted. You know, if I was trying to copy something or whatever, I can make it look exactly. But then when I tried to paint it, I couldn't paint it. You know, I didn't understand the basics of painting.
So he helped you develop the technique.
He really helped me big time. But I still was lacking in what I really wanted to achieve. Like what I could achieve with a pencil was just nowhere near what I wanted to achieve with the paint. You know.
Have you ever taken any type of classes for painting or drawing?
Yeah, I did. I mean, I took a couple in school, you know, just in high school, and then I was to the point to where, like I said, I really wanted to get better in the painting. So I was thinking about going to the community college, Anne Arundel Community College. At that point, I was living up in the Glen Burnie area, so I was thinking about going there. And one day, I brought some of my artwork in. I was showing some of my fellow employees. Actually, I was working at the bowling center at the time. So a lady that was one of the ladies who bowled in one of the leagues there, she happened to walk by and seen them. You know, she commented on my work, and she thought, you know, it was good and all. And I said, yeah, you know, I said, thinking about, you know, taking lessons because I can't do what I wanted to. You know?
So you would have your paintings at work?
Well, I took them in just to show a couple of my fellow employees that day. You know, they knew I was into the painting. And they just wanted to see some new things that I did. You know, so I showed them. And so she, it was fortunate that I did because she told me about this lady that she took lessons from that taught out of her basement. You know, she basically had small classes, like 6 to 8, you know, students at a time. You know, so she gave me her phone number and everything. So I called the lady up and talked to her and went to see her. You know, so I basically, it showed her, you know, my work and explained to her, you know, what I wanted to do. And she had said, well, you know, I can teach you everything that the college will teach you. The only thing is I can't give you a degree, you know. And I said, well, I'm not really concerned about the degree. You know, I just want to learn to paint better is basically what I wanted to do, you know. So, you know, if you want to come, you know, I can teach you, you know. And so I did, and, you know, first I was like, at first she wanted me to paint something, like to bring in a picture of something that, like a painting that I liked or something, to try to reproduce that so she could help me with it, because it was hard for me to, like, try to, like, for her to help me if I was trying to paint something that was pretty much out of my imagination, because she didn't have anything to compare it to.
No
to tell me, like, okay,
right.
You know, you need to be softer here with the paint, or you need to be doing different things here like that and all, you know. So we went along, and it was really good. There was a lot of other people that I thought was really talented, you know, in the class. I was probably around 25, 26, somewhere around there, you know. So I think it was good because here I was with people that painted. I remember there was this one man that he was painting this picture, and he was just painting this picture. It was like this old field that had this old truck in it that was all beat up and dilapidated, you know, and he had a picture of it, and he was doing it, and he was doing a great job at it, you know. And I was watching him and talking to him, and he said, yeah, he says, you know, but, you know, really, if his truck was as old as, you know, what it was supposed to be, you know, this would have been different, this might have been more rusty, or this would have been like this,
right.
You know. And I said, well, why don't you paint it that way, you know? And he's like, no, I couldn't do that. I said, well, you've envisioned it, you know, you've already told me about it, you know, but he didn't want to take that chance to do that,
right.
you know. And so, like I said, with me, you know, I wanted new challenges, so I wanted, you know.
An art is about taking risks and exploring.
It is, you know, and like I've learned much more from my mistakes and failures than I've had from my successes. You know, I mean, that's pretty much you learn. You know, if you
Definitely.
It depends on, you know, if you really want to achieve what you want to achieve.
Right.
You have to be your biggest fan, but you have to be your worst critic too.
Right.
You know. So I took the lady for 6 months, and I really improved. You know, I was doing much better, you know, and she was telling me, yeah, you know, you pretty much got all the basics down now. You got it all. You know, it's just going to come together, you know.
Right.
So she didn't teach over the summer, so I took off for about 3 months, and I continued to paint. And then I was going to take her again in September because I really, you know, enjoyed the class and all. And I took her some work that I did over the 3 months. And she was really surprised, you know. She was like, man, it's like I haven't seen you for 3 years instead of 3 months. She said, I can't, you know, believe the improvement you made.
Right.
You know, and she was like, you know, I think you should just continue on doing what you want. You know, if you want to come to the class, you can. You know, if you don't, he said, you know, if you got questions, you can always call me up. You can always bring a piece of work by, you know.
So Fish said, good job, Grasshopper.
Yeah, it was pretty much like
journey.
that, you know.
Right.
But she also made me realize something that I never really realized before, and that was like, you know, because she was telling, you know, you're very, very talented with the art and everything.
Mm-hmm.
She said, and you paint very well. And she says, you know, you probably paint almost as well as I do. She says, but the difference is I got to have a picture in front of me. She says, you know, your real gift is your imagination. You don't realize that.
Right.
But that's what your real gift is because, you know, anyone can learn to paint, you know, and to take a picture and paint the picture and then try to make it as perfect as possible.
Right.
But then, you know, because I had the imagination, I wanted to create, you know, different pictures and things like that, you know. So I guess it was fortunate there too that, you know, that she made me realize that, because she was the first one that ever, you know, everybody else had always talked about, oh, you really, you know, good with the art and everything.
So you've actually won an award or awards for your art?
Yeah,
your
I've placed in some contests and stuff like that. Like recently, I was just runner-up in Science Fiction Book Club.
Oh, okay.
They had a cover art contest.
What was the
runner-up?
What was the piece that you
did?
It
was actually it was it's a knight. It's like a knight in his blue shining armor. And
how did you come up with the concept for it?
This painting I had done before, so I just submitted it. I just thought that this was like a painting that would make a really good fantasy art cover, which is what the sci-fi book club, they deal with mostly science fiction and fantasy art and stuff like that. So I, you know, but the way I did come up with the concept of it was I did see a picture, and it was a background, and it was trees, and it was kind of like almost like shot from like the bottom up. The perspective of it was, and the way it was, it kind of went up, and it was out of focus too, you know. So I thought that this would be cool if I had like a knight on like a horse, and it was like charging at you. So the way the painting looks, it looks like the knight is charging out of the painting at you, and like with the background, it helps add to the movement. It looks like he's even almost galloping right at you. One of the things, like the artist I said that was my biggest influence, Frank Frazetta, one of the things that he said was that, you know, don't be a second-rate Frazetta, be a first-rate Jew. And, you know, there's some artists that you can tell that was trying to copy his style, you know, that you could see the influence so much, but it almost looked like it was like one of his paintings, you know. Whereas with me, you can still see the influence of his, but you can see that it's me adapting it to my style, my way of painting. You know, I'm not trying to paint. And there's
nothing new under the sun. We're not reinventing the wheel, but you are, when you get inspiration from things, you're always supposed to put your own twist on it and recreate it. Yeah, in a way.
Yeah, like you said, there's nothing new under the sun, so it's hard to create anything new. But like you said, just put your own little twist in it. You know.
Well, in the spirit of sharing all of your arts with us. We're going to take a look at some video of you playing your guitar earlier, and then when we come back from the break, we will talk about the book. And the name of the book is The Adventures of Whiney Erin in Teardrop Land. Now, the book is called The Adventures of Whiney Erin in Teardrop Land. How did you come up with the concept for that? What inspired that?
Years and years ago, I was living with this lady, and she had a daughter, and her daughter's name was Aryan, and she was kind of emotional, you know, so one evening she was really upset, you know, and we couldn't get her to calm down, so she was crying a lot, you know, so I was trying to kid with her, trying to cheer her up, you know, so I told her, I said, look, I said, if you don't stop crying, you're going to get washed away in your tears. And I just thought, oh, that might be, you know, kind of cute, you know, a little thing to do. And, you know, writing was something that, you know, I had done. I had taken a lot of English classes in school and all. Something that I liked. I think it went along, too, with the comics, like maybe trying to write and do the art for a comic. You know, I had some ideas about some things like that.
Well, the theme to me was a bit reminiscent of Alice in Wonderland meets The Little Mermaid. Were those play into?
Well, that kind of came in later. I mean, it was like it was years later, and it was again with the art, with the painting, you know. And once again, I was working somewhere different, and I had taken some artwork in to show some of my, you know, fellow workers, you know, and they were really impressed. And one of the ladies that worked with me said, you know, Joe, you're so imaginative. You should try to write a book, you know, because you use your imagination, your pictures tell stories. You know, you should try to do that. So I had thought about it and I said, you know, that's an idea. And I had thought about doing like a sword and sorcery type book, like a Lord of the Rings type thing, but nowhere near as long, but a story like that, you know. So I started working on that, and I did work that, and I did complete that, you know. And then once I completed that, then I started thinking, well, you know, maybe I can write too. You know, this is a different way to use my imagination. And then I started thinking about, you know, the Whiney Erin thing. And I've always, you know, loved children. And, you know, everybody that knows me, you know, when their children always take to me, you know, I'm the type where I'm always trying to, you know, get them to laugh and things like that. So I started thinking, well, maybe I can develop, you know, Whiney Erin. You know, and I started thinking about it. And then, yeah, I came up with the, her being washed away in the tears. So I thought, okay, I'll make her an emotional child, and I did that, you know, and then I had her washed away down in Teardrop Land. You know.
Some of the themes that stuck out to me when I was reading the book was one of teamwork. Well, first of all, explain a little bit without giving too much away. Explain the concept of the book, the storyline, without giving too much away.
Okay, yeah. Well, it's basically, it's about a little girl that's very emotional, gets washed away in her tears to this magical land, and she finds out she has to go on a quest to find these 4 magic wands. So basically she has to, it's a princess, and there's 2 fairies. It's Tiny Drip and Morning Dew, and then there's
Fred.
Fred, yeah, who is the fearless little 3-foot tall bodyguard.
Right.
And he's a lovable little idiot, you know. I'd say he's like a pint-sized Shrek kind of like thing. And
so they embark on the journey, and you know the story highlights the importance of teamwork and also facing your fears and obstacles, regardless of what some may see as your limitations. Like as far as with Fred, he was a short guy, and everyone doubted his abilities. So what did you, when you were writing the book, what did you hope kids would get out of the book or take from it?
See, I wanted to write something like for children, you know, so I wanted them to laugh, have a good, you know, I didn't want it to be like, say, other children's books. I didn't want anything scary. I didn't want any blood. I didn't want any death. I didn't want any of that. I wanted everything to be upbeat. I wanted, you know, the thing like what you're saying, like working together, because like they do have many obstacles that they have to overcome. And Fred, who's supposed to be the bodyguard, is usually the one getting in trouble instead of getting them out of trouble. So it's like they all have to work as a team. So it is about teamwork. It is about, you know, like you said, overcoming your shortcomings. Because one of the things with Erin was she was very emotional, and she had to learn to be stronger and not cry over the little things and things like that.
Far Up Fred is one of the main characters in the book. Talk about how you came up with his character and his persona.
Yeah. Well, originally, I loved the name Far Up Fred. It was just a name I came up with, and originally, I planned on making him like 7 feet tall, larger, you know, taller than everyone else, and that was what his name was, when, you know, Far Up Fred. But one day, me and one of my coworkers, who was also a good friend of mine, his name was AJ, we were out and about, and he was, you know, walking behind me, and we both had light jackets on. He had his hands in his pocket, and he said, "Hey, Joe," he says, "I feel like you're goon." I'm like, "My what?" He says, "You know, you're goon." He says, "You're a bodyguard." I'm like, "What?" I'm like, "You know, what kind of bodyguard are you going to be?" Because AJ's only 5'2", you know. I'm like, you know, what am I going to do? Pick you up and hold you as a shield? I'm like, or are you going to put your hands on your hip and try to look mean at people, which is a habit that he would do at times.
Yeah.
And then as soon as I said it, I was like, oh, I got to make you Far Up Fred, you know, because
I hope he's not going to want royalties now.
Yeah, he probably does, because he is on the cover too, because he is part of the painting that I painted for the cover, you know. So once I decided that he was going to become Far Up Fred, then the story kind of, you know, took a whole different perspective. You know, he kind of took over a little bit because of us being such good friends, and just of AJ doing a lot of silly things. You know, a lot of them got into the book. I mean, there was even like one point where we were at work, and we work at a restaurant, and James Brown's song come on, you know, and he says, "I feel good." And AJ started doing the shuffle, and he's like, "Oh, don't let me do my James Brown." And I was like, "Oh, that would be cool to have Fred do James Brown." So I did incorporate that into the book.
Yeah, that's pretty funny.
Yeah.
I think when I was reading the book, your artistic talents are pretty apparent. The writing is pretty vivid, kind of like a picture or a drawing. And then some of the characters, like Far Up Fred, whenever he speaks, it's always in a rhyme throughout the whole book, which is indicative of your musical talents as well. So was that a conscious effort to infuse all of your artistic talents?
Yeah, it was. I mean, when I was writing it, I was also envisioning it as a movie, so I think it was my visual part, so that was a big part of it. And with the music, I liked, you know, doing the rhymes. Once I started doing the rhymes.
Was it hard to infuse all those elements?
I don't think so, really, you know, because once I started getting into the writing of it, you know, the rhymes, a lot of the rhymes I even wrote at work. I mean, like, you know, because me and AJ would work together. He might say something funny, and I would incorporate it in there, you know. The rhymes, at first I wasn't going to have as many rhymes as I put into the book, but the thing was, is like I said earlier, I didn't want any death, I didn't want any blood, I didn't want any of that. And I was coming up with different names for animals and things to try to, like, so the kids could relate. Like I came up with paddle tails for beavers, which I thought kids could relate to. And then I came up with a good name for alligators, which was snapjaws. But I was like, okay, you know, how am I going to have my group go against some alligators? Because alligators kind of ferocious, you know, and I didn't want to have weapons and like this, you know. So then I got to thinking, well, you know, I have Fred, you know, rhyme and all, and I said, well, hey, I'll take the alligators and I'll make them into 4 brothers. I'll make them into a rap group, and then I'll have Fred and his group have a rap battle against them. I said, no, this way they can, you know, have a competition, but there's no physical things like this.
Right.
So then once I decided that, then the rhymes really started coming more and more. And then I started thinking more of the rhymes and, you know, like you were saying, incorporating some of the music too, you know, because I love the music, because it did incorporate some songs and things into it along with the rhymes.
When you first sat down initially to write the book, did you have the plot already planned out, or did that kind of evolve while you were writing?
That one more or less evolved. I mean, most of them, like some of the other things I've written, I may have had the ending and may have had like an idea for the beginning, but yeah, it did pretty much evolve as I was writing it. You know, I've even that's the great thing about having computers as opposed to typewriters. You know, because a
lot more efficient.
Yeah, it is, and also I was able to even like reposition chapters. You know, whereas like I had maybe one chapter that was later in the book, and then after I like had finished it, I thought it would work better earlier in the book. You know, so.
Now, is this the first book you've written, or just the first book you've had published?
It's the first book I had published. It was actually the second book that I wrote, but it was the first book. I just thought that had a little more appeal than the other book. So, you know, and
how long did that whole process take from the time you started writing it until the time, or from the time you finished until the time it actually got published?
It was probably, I'd say maybe like a year and a half, somewhere around there. You know, so it wasn't. I mean, the book came pretty quickly. You know, like once I really got into the character. So the book took me, I would say, maybe 3-4 months or so to write, and then there was, you know, editing and going through that process.
Yeah, that was going to be my next question, because again, you were not formally educated in writing per se. So what kind of feedback did you seek out? How did you revise it until you thought it was good enough to submit for publishing?
I did it with a few friends and then a few people that I knew that I did actually know one lady that was associated with editing in the past and all. So I did send it to her. So she did some of the editing for me, you know. What
would you say is your favorite creation thus far, from books to the drawings, paintings? If you can say you have a favorite, because I know they're probably kind of like like people say they're like my kids.
Yeah,
I can't name a favorite.
It's really hard to pick out a favorite, you know, because of like what you said. I think a little bit of me goes into everything I do, whether it's the painting, whether it's the writing, you know. And like you said, I do think of them as my children. I've parted with few of my paintings. I mean, I've sold a few, not too many. Some of them I've given away as gifts, you know, because it is hard for me to part with them, because I like you said, I feel like there's it is my children, like this is part of me, you know. You
have a full-time job, so I'm pretty sure you work 9 to 5 hours or pretty close to that. How do you find the time to indulge and hone your craft? It's a matter of just I guess just trying to discipline yourself, you know. I'm the type of person that once I get to where, you know, I want to do something, I get it into my head that I want to do it, and I really try to pursue it, you know. But it still is hard to make times. I mean, I don't have the time I would like to have, you know. But sometimes it's a matter of the creation itself, I guess. You know, sometimes like I've gotten into a painting and I'm almost obsessed with it, you know. So I want to finish it. So I force myself to have time. So now you've written 2 books. One's published, and you're kind of expanding your writing genre a little bit. Now you're doing screenplays? Yeah, I started to try to take my hand on trying to write screenplays, which is a whole other different, you know, genre in itself. It was because I always envisioned the children's book as a movie. So I was like, okay, well, maybe I'll try to write a screenplay, you know. So ultimately, where do you see your art impacting your life or taking you? Or impacting others? I would like to share it with others. I mean, I think that Whiney Erin would be something that if I found the right people to get behind, that I think that, you know, would be enjoyed by a lot of, not just children, but adults too. I think it has that appeal. It kind of has that Shrek appeal, but differently, you know. And like you said, it's I kind of describe it that way as far as like
the movie screenplay, I kind of pitch it that way. Like it's like a modern day Alice in Wonderland meets a pint-sized Shrek.
So more contests.
Yeah, hopefully, you know, my screenplays have placed in contests, so I've made it to the quarterfinals, semifinals. I actually even had a couple reads, which is very difficult to get anyone to read them. You know, I did have a guy from Lionsgate read one of my screenplays, and he was impressed with it. You know, he thought it was a well-written, elaborate screenplay, and he said he thought I had crossed genres differently than he had seen before, but it was just something they weren't interested in at the time. But yeah, it was still a big deal that at least, you know, he took the time.
Definitely,
to,
you got that feedback.
You know, and the thing is it's really hard to break into art, entertainment, music.
Yeah, there's a lot of
type
competition.
Things,
yeah,
know.
for sure.
The thing is trying to find an agent, you know, and it's really, really hard.
What advice would you give to other aspiring artists, whether or not they're formally trained or have went to grad school and got their masters in art? What advice would you give anyone who loves to create art?
Just continue to create. I think not to give up. You know, to continue to try. To not get upset by your mistakes, or you know, just to continue
and learn from your mistakes.
Yeah, learn from your mistakes. You know.
So anybody who's interested in getting the book, where can they find out?
Okay, they can. You can purchase it online. It's at publishamerica.com. Okay. You also can go pretty much to. It's not really like in the bookstores, but you could go to pretty much any bookstore and you could order it offline. Okay. You know.
And do you have a website that showcases any of your art?
I don't have one personally, but there is a website. It's called paintingsiLove.com, and it's like an international website. It's for any artist, so you can go up there. If you just go up there and then you just type in my name, and then you can see some of my artwork up there. The one that I just did recently that placed in the contest, that's up there. The painting that I did for a CD for a local band, that's there, and also the painting for the book cover, that's there too, along with some other ones.
All right. Well, Joe, I want to thank you for taking the time out to come talk with us here and talk about your experiences and your art. And we will catch you next time on another episode of Books, Books, Books.